Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to HK Cheating Stories. We appreciate each and every one of you joining us. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's get the story started.
I thought marrying the love of my life, Daniel, would be the start of my happily ever after. But I never expected his sister, Lena, to turn my life into a nightmare. From subtle manipulations to outright sabotage, she wanted me gone. I ignored the warning signs until the day she tried to poison me. For 7 years, my marriage to Daniel has been my greatest blessing. We built a beautiful life together, filled with love, laughter, and the kind of partnership most people only dream about. But there was always one shadow looming over us, his sister, Lena. First, I wanted to like her. No, more than that, I wanted us to be close. I imagined her as the sister I never had, someone who would welcome me into the family with open arms. And in the beginning, she did. She was warm, friendly, and full of energy. But as time passed, the facade cracked, and I saw her for who she really was: manipulative, possessive, and obsessed with controlling Daniel's life. The shift was gradual. Small, almost unnoticeable things at first. She would casually bring up Daniel's ex-girlfriends in conversations, always with an innocent smile. "Oh, I ran into Sophie the other day. She looks amazing. You should catch up with her, Danny." Or, "Remember Rachel? She just got engaged. Can you believe it? I always thought you two were perfect for each other." Every single time I was around, she would find a way to mention them. It wasn't subtle. It was deliberate, like a slow, calculated knife twisting in my gut. And Daniel noticed it too. "Lena, stop bringing up my exes," he told her one night after she had spent an entire dinner reminiscing about how much fun he used to have with one of them. It's weird, but she would always brush it off with a laugh, rolling her eyes at me like I was the problem. "Oh, come on. You know Emma gets jealous so easily. Relax, sis-in-law. It's just a joke." A joke. That's what she called it. It wasn't just words. It was her actions, too. Whenever my in-laws invited us over for dinner, she somehow always managed to invite one of his exes. "Oh, I just happened to bump into her and thought it would be nice to catch up," right? Like it was just a coincidence every single time. But the worst part? She was always watching me. I never followed her on social media, but she sure kept tabs on mine. I had a public Instagram account, and she was always the first to view my stories, lurking in the background like a ghost. If a male colleague or a childhood friend commented on one of my photos, she would immediately run to Daniel. "Why is Emma posting pictures like that? Do you really think it's appropriate? I mean, other men are commenting. It's kind of embarrassing for you, don't you think?" Daniel and I would laugh about it at first, brushing off her paranoia. But deep down, I knew this wasn't normal. She wasn't just being overprotective of her brother. She was territorial, like she saw me as an intruder in her family. Then came the moment I knew, without a doubt, that she hated me. When Daniel and I moved in together, she lost it. She pulled him aside, whispering venom into his ear. "She's not right for you. I can find someone better. You deserve better." Better? I had done nothing but try to be kind to her, to include her in our lives, to make her feel like she wasn't losing her brother but gaining a sister. And yet, in her eyes, I would never be enough. Still, I swallowed my pride, convinced myself that if I tried hard enough, she would eventually accept me. I wanted peace, not war. But I was wrong, because Lena was just getting started, and she would do anything to make sure I was erased from Daniel's life. I should have known that my wedding would be her battlefield. The moment Daniel and I got engaged, the energy shifted. Our friends and family were overjoyed, congratulating us with warm hugs and happy tears. But Lena, she sat in silence, her smile forced, her eyes dark and calculating. And then, out of nowhere, she stood up and stormed out of the room without saying a word. That night, Daniel got a call from her. Sobbing, yelling, demanding to know why she wasn't the first to hear about our engagement. "I thought I was your closest family. How could you let me find out like everyone else?" Daniel was dumbfounded. "Lena, it wasn't a secret. We wanted to announce it with everyone there. But she wasn't listening. She was spiraling, making it about her, like our engagement was somehow an attack on her life. And when I didn't respond to the borderline threatening message she sent me later that night, I knew I had just made an enemy out of my future sister-in-law. From that moment on, she made it her mission to ruin my wedding. Every decision I made, she criticized. The venue? Too basic. The dress? Not flattering for your body type. The flowers? Tacky. She inserted herself into every step of the planning process, acting like she had some kind of authority over our choices. Even my mother-in-law, who had always been kind to me, told her to back off. But Lena didn't stop. The worst part was the dress shopping. It was supposed to be one of the happiest moments of my life. Standing in front of the mirror, surrounded by my loved ones, seeing myself in the dress. But there she was, arms crossed, lips pursed, tearing me down with every word. That one makes you look wide. You know, lace is kind of outdated. I don't know. Daniel always liked women with a little more shape. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to smile. I had worked so hard to be patient with her, to avoid conflict, to keep the peace. But when she made that last comment, I felt something inside me snap. Enough, Lena. You don't have to like my dress, because you're not the one wearing it. In fact, you don't even have to come to the wedding at all. She looked at me, stunned, like she never expected me to fight back. Then, her expression twisted into pure rage. Later that night, she called Daniel, crying. She played the victim, acting like I had attacked her, like I was some kind of monster trying to push her out of his life. You need to control your fiancé. She's so disrespectful to me. But for the first time, Daniel didn't take her side. Lena, you've done nothing but disrespect Emma since the day I met her. If she doesn't want you at the wedding, I support her decision. That hit her hard. 2 days later, I got a message. It was an apology, one that I knew was fake, but I ignored it anyway. I was done playing games. And yet, despite everything, I let her come to the wedding. Not because I forgave her, not because I wanted her there, but because I refused to give her the satisfaction of playing the victim. I refused to let her twist the story, to tell people that I was the villain keeping poor, innocent Lena away from her brother's big day. Looking back, I wish I had trusted my instincts, because what she did next was worse than I could have ever imagined. On the day of our wedding, as I stood in my white dress, heart pounding, ready to walk down the aisle, I turned my head, and there she was, wearing black, not just black, a floor-length, funeral-style gown, complete with a veil covering her face. A statement, a message, a declaration to everyone that she was grieving, not celebrating, not supporting her brother, grieving, as if my marriage was his death. Gasps rippled through the guests as she made her entrance, dramatic as ever, whispering to people, telling them how much she missed her brother. She even faked dabbing tears from her eyes as if this was some tragic event for her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw her out. But this was my wedding day, my perfect day, and I refused to let her ruin it. But Daniel wasn't as patient. When he saw her, his jaw clenched, and he marched straight toward her. What the hell is wrong with you? And just like always, she played the victim. Oh, I'm just expressing myself. Since when is it a crime to wear black? Daniel looked at me. I shook my head. She's not worth it. So instead, it was my mother-in-law who stepped up. Lena, leave. Now. And for the first time, she had no power, no control. With a dramatic sigh, she picked up the hem of her morning dress, gave me one last glare, and stormed out. And just like that, she was gone. Or so I thought. Because if there was one thing I had learned about Lena, it was that she never, ever stayed gone for long. For a while, I thought I had finally won. After the wedding fiasco, Lena slithered back into the shadows. No dramatic texts, no fake apologies, no attempts to insert herself into our lives. It was quiet, too quiet. But I told myself that maybe, just maybe, she had finally let go. Maybe she had finally accepted that Daniel was mine, that he had a new family now. I was wrong, because Lena was never the type to accept defeat. At first, her interference was subtle, almost calculated. Whenever we visited my in-laws, she would be there, silent, brooding, watching me with that familiar look of disdain. But the moment Daniel left the room, she would strike. "So, Emma, when are you going to start pulling your weight financially? My brother pays for everything, right? Or, I heard from Mom that you're not the best cook. I hope you're at least trying to take care of my brother properly." I learned to ignore her. It wasn't worth the fight. But then she did something I couldn't ignore. She questioned my son's paternity. It happened during one of those family dinners that Daniel and I had reluctantly agreed to attend. Everyone was talking, laughing, until Lena suddenly leaned forward, her voice just loud enough for the entire table to hear. "You know, Noah doesn't really look like Daniel." Silence. Everyone froze, forks suspended in midair. My heart pounded as I stared at her, trying to process what she had just said. "Excuse me?" I finally managed. She shrugged, swirling the wine in her glass like she hadn't just dropped a nuclear bomb in the middle of dinner. "I'm just saying, genetics are weird, right? He's got different features than Daniel. I mean, I know you used to go to the gym a lot and you were always changing at the office. You were around a lot of guys." I felt the blood drain from my face. Daniel slammed his fist on the table so hard that the plates rattled. "Lena, enough." His voice was sharp, his eyes burning with a fury I had never seen before. But she just smirked, completely unfazed. "Relax, big brother. I'm just looking out for you. You never know. Cheaters are everywhere these days." That was it. That was the moment I knew we were done with her. "Get out," I said, my voice shaking with rage. She blinked, feigning innocence. "Oh, come on, Emma. Don't be so sensitive." I said get out. I screamed, pushing my chair back so fast it nearly toppled over. Daniel stood beside me, his hands balled into fists. "You are disgusting, Lena. I don't ever want to see you near my wife or my son again." Still, she didn't look remorseful. If anything, she looked satisfied. "Fine," she said coolly, grabbing her purse. "But don't come crying to me when she betrays you. You'll see." And just like that, she walked out of our lives. For a year, there was peace. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. It was as if she had finally moved on. Until we got pregnant again. And that's when the nightmare truly began. For the first time in years, I finally felt free. After Lena walked out of that dinner, Daniel and I made the decision to cut her off completely. No more family gatherings, no more fake pleasantries, no more second chances. She was toxic, and we weren't going to let her infect our lives anymore. And for a while, things were good. Our son, Noah, was growing up happy and healthy. Our marriage was stronger than ever. Life finally felt peaceful. Then, 2 months ago, everything changed. I was pregnant. It wasn't planned, but it was the best surprise we could have ever asked for. When I saw those 2 little pink lines on the test, my heart nearly burst with joy. I ran to Daniel, tears in my eyes, and when I told him, he lifted me off the ground and spun me in circles. We decided to wait for the perfect moment to share the news with our loved ones. And what better time than Daniel's birthday? My in-laws were hosting a party at their house, inviting close friends and family. It was the ideal setting to celebrate not just my husband, but the new life we were bringing into the world. But, of course, she found out. Somehow, somewhere, Lena caught wind of the party. And despite not being invited, despite not speaking to us in over a year, she showed up. I felt my stomach drop the moment I saw her walk into the backyard. She looked different, softer. Her usual cold, calculating eyes had been replaced with something almost vulnerable. It threw me off. Daniel stiffened beside me, his grip on my hand tightening. His parents were just as surprised as we were. "I didn't invite her," my mother-in-law whispered to me. "Do you want us to kick her out?" I wanted to say yes. I should have said yes. But before I could answer, Lena made her move. She walked straight up to Daniel, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. "I missed you," she whispered. Daniel didn't move, didn't say a word. Then, she turned to me. "Emma." Her voice was softer than I had ever heard it. "I need to apologize to you. For everything." I stared at her, my heart pounding. "I've been in therapy," she continued. "I've spent months working on myself, and I've realized how terribly I treated you. I was awful. I was cruel. And I am so sorry." She clasped her hands together, looking at me with an expression I never thought I'd see on her face. Guilt. Everyone was watching. The entire party had gone silent, waiting to see what I would do. I didn't believe her, not for a second, but I nodded anyway. Okay, because this wasn't the time. This wasn't about her. This was Daniel's night, and I refused to let her make it about herself. For the rest of the party, she acted different. She laughed with guests. She smiled at our parents. She seemed genuinely happy. It was unsettling, like watching a stranger wearing Lena's skin. I should have trusted my instincts, because the moment we announced our pregnancy, her mask slipped. Daniel and I stood in front of everyone, hand in hand, beaming with excitement. "We have some amazing news to share," Daniel said, his voice filled with emotion. "Emma and I are expecting." The room erupted into cheers. My mother burst into tears. My father-in-law clapped Daniel on the back. Friends and family rushed forward to congratulate us. And then I saw her. Lena stood completely still, her face frozen in an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Shock? Anger? Something darker? And just like that, the warmth in her eyes vanished. She turned away from the crowd, her hands clenched into fists. I should have known then. I should have seen the warning signs, because what she did next proved that she had never changed at all. The moment Lena heard the news of my pregnancy, I saw it. That flicker of something dark beneath the surface, the mask slipping just enough to reveal the resentment lurking underneath. She didn't smile. She didn't clap. She didn't even pretend to be happy like everyone else. Instead, she turned away from the crowd, her hands tightening into fists. Her jaw clenched so hard I thought she might shatter her teeth. But then, just as quickly as the expression came, it was gone. She spun back around, her face morphing into an almost too enthusiastic grin. "Emma, that's amazing!" she practically sang, pushing through the crowd toward me. I stiffened. Something about her energy felt wrong, like she was trying too hard. "I'm just so happy for you too," she continued, reaching out to squeeze my hand. "And to make up for all the times I was awful to you, let me do something special for you tonight." I barely had time to react before she was gone, disappearing into the house. I didn't think much of it at first. There were too many people congratulating us, too much joy in the air. My mother-in-law told me to sit and rest. My father insisted on pouring Daniel a celebratory drink, and my parents kept me distracted with talk about baby names. Then Lena came back, carrying a plate of food. She was smiling, too wide, too forced. "I personally made this plate for you, Emma. Just a little something to show how excited I am to be an aunt." I looked down. It was a mix of roasted vegetables, rice, and shrimp. Shrimp. My stomach twisted. I had a severe shellfish allergy, something everyone in the family knew, including Lena. I forced a polite smile. "Oh, thank you, but I think I'll just grab my own plate." Lena's eyes darkened for the briefest second before she laughed. "Come on, Emma. I made this just for you. I feel awful about how I treated you in the past, and I just wanted to do something nice." Every instinct in my body screamed at me that something was wrong. "I appreciate it, Lena, but I really just want to pick my own food," I said firmly. She hesitated, then slowly nodded. "Of course, whatever makes you comfortable." She placed the plate on the table in front of me and walked away. I thought that was the end of it. I turned back to my conversation, trying to push away the unease lingering in my gut. I wasn't even thinking about the plate anymore when Mark, Lena's husband, approached me. "Hey, congrats again, Emma," he said warmly, then gestured to the untouched plate in front of me. "Not hungry." "Oh, I'm just being careful," I said, waving it off. "Lena made it for me, but she put shrimp in it. She must have forgotten about my allergy." Mark's eyebrows shot up. "Shrimp?" he repeated, glancing at the plate. "I love shrimp." Before I could say anything, he grabbed a fork and scooped a bite into his mouth. The moment he swallowed, his face twisted. Ugh! What is? He gagged suddenly, grabbing his throat. Then, everything happened too fast. Mark's body jerked forward. His hands flew to his mouth as he heaved violently. His eyes bulged, his skin paling as he began retching, staggering backward. The entire party froze. Then chaos erupted. "Someone call 911. My mother-in-law screamed. Mark collapsed onto his knees, gasping for air. His entire body trembled, his face contorted in agony. People were rushing around, shouting, panicking, while I sat there, frozen in horror, because that plate, it was meant for me. Lena came running over, her face filled with panic as she kneeled beside Mark. "What happened?" she cried. Mark, barely able to speak, pointed weakly at the plate. Lena's face changed. It was subtle, but I saw it. The flicker of realization, the fear that crept into her eyes. Then she turned to me. "Did you give him your food?" she demanded, her voice sharp, accusing. I didn't eat it," I stammered. "He just took a bite." Her face twisted. "You let him eat your food?" she shrieked. "Emma, what did you do?" And that's when it hit me. She was trying to flip this. She wasn't panicked because Mark was sick. She was panicked because her plan had gone wrong. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, the paramedics arrived. They rushed Mark onto a stretcher, wheeling him toward the ambulance as people bombarded us with questions. What happened? Was it food poisoning? Who made the plate? And then I heard someone whisper, "That was Emma's plate, wasn't it?" My blood turned to ice, because if they were already questioning it, then I knew what was coming next. The police, and I had no choice but to tell them the truth, because if I didn't, Lena would make sure I was the one blamed for this. I sat frozen, my pulse hammering in my ears as the paramedics wheeled Mark away. The party had dissolved into pure chaos. People whispered in hushed, frantic tones. Some were on their phones calling other family members while others hovered near the plate, my plate, like it was some kind of crime scene. And in the middle of it all stood Lena. She was pacing, her hands in her hair, her breaths coming in sharp, dramatic gasps. But I knew her well enough by now to recognize the performance. She wasn't horrified. She wasn't worried about Mark. She was terrified that her plan had backfired. Because that plate was never meant for her husband. It was meant for me. And now Mark was in the hospital. And the police were coming. Daniel was at my side in an instant, his arm wrapping protectively around me. I could feel his heartbeat pounding against me, as fast and erratic as my own. "Emma," he whispered urgently. Did she? I swallowed hard. I didn't want to say it. Saying it out loud would make it real. But there was no denying the truth. "She gave me the plate, Daniel," I whispered back. She knew I was allergic. His body tensed like a live wire, his jaw clenching so tight I thought his teeth might crack. He turned, his eyes locking onto Lena. "You," he growled. Lena's head snapped up. "What?" she gasped, playing the innocent, her voice trembling. "I didn't do anything. I was just trying to be nice. And now Mark is in the hospital." I could barely believe what I was hearing. She was really going to try to flip this. And the worst part? Some people were already starting to doubt. "Maybe it was just a bad batch of food," someone muttered. "Yeah, it could have been an accident. Poor Lena. This must be so hard on her." I clenched my fists, rage building in my chest. She had spent years manipulating people, playing the victim, twisting every situation to make herself look innocent. And now she was doing it again. But this time I had proof. I turned to my mother-in-law, my voice shaking. "You have security cameras in the backyard, right?" Her eyes widened. Yes, we do," she whispered, realization dawning on her. Daniel didn't hesitate. He grabbed his father's phone, opened the security app, and scrolled back through the footage. And there it was, clear as day. The footage showed Lena walking up to me, handing me the plate. The way she smiled, the way she insisted I eat it. And then, when I hesitated, the way her expression flickered into irritation before she backed off. I felt my stomach twist. It was all so deliberate. Daniel turned the screen toward Lena. "Explain this," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Lena's face turned ghostly pale. That doesn't mean anything," she stammered. I was just being nice." "Nice?" Daniel spat. "Emma is deathly allergic to shrimp." "Lena, you knew that." The entire party was watching now. The whispers had stopped. People were staring at her. And for the first time, she was cornered. Before she could respond, flashing red and blue lights lit up the front yard. The police had arrived. A lump formed in my throat as 2 officers stepped onto the patio, scanning the scene. "We received a call about a possible poisoning," one of them said. "Who prepared the food in question?" The entire crowd turned to Lena. She took a step back, her eyes darting wildly between Daniel, me, and the officers. It wasn't me," she burst out. "I didn't mean for him to eat it." Her words died in her throat, because in that moment, she realized her mistake. She had just admitted it. The officers' expressions darkened. "Miss, we're going to need you to come with us," one of them said. Lena's breath hitched. She looked at Daniel, then at her parents, her eyes wild and pleading. "Mom, Dad, please, tell them this is a mistake." But for the first time, her parents didn't jump to defend her. My mother-in-law just shook her head, her face lined with disappointment. My father-in-law sighed, running a hand down his face. "Lena, what did you do?" Lena's lip trembled, her entire body shaking. Then, as the officers pulled out their handcuffs, she did the one thing I never expected. She turned to me, and she smiled. A slow, eerie, knowing smile. "You'll regret this, Emma," she whispered. "One way or another." Then the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, and she was led away. But even as she disappeared into the back of the police car, her words clung to me like a stain I couldn't wash off, because deep down I knew this wasn't over. Even after the police car disappeared down the street, I couldn't shake the feeling that Lena wasn't really gone. Her last words clung to me like a thick fog. "You'll regret this, Emma. One way or another." I wanted to believe it was just an empty threat, the desperate words of someone finally caught in their own twisted web. But I knew better. Lena wasn't the type to accept consequences. She was the type to twist reality, to manipulate, to strike back. The night ended in a blur. The party was ruined. My in-laws stayed with us, too shaken to return home. Daniel barely spoke, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. And me? I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with everything that had happened. Mark was in the hospital. My unborn baby had almost been poisoned. The woman who had spent years trying to destroy me was now sitting in a jail cell. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was dread. The next morning, Daniel got a call. Lena had confessed. Not because she felt guilty, not because she had a sudden change of heart, but because the evidence against her was too overwhelming to fight. The security footage, the witnesses, the fact that she had literally admitted her intentions in front of the police, it was all too much to talk her way out of. So she did what she always did. She played the victim. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," she sobbed during her confession. "I was just emotional. I just wanted Emma to feel a little sick. That's all. I would never actually harm her or the baby. It was just a mistake." A mistake. She had poisoned my food, with enough toxin to make Mark collapse in a matter of minutes. And she called it a mistake. When Daniel told me what she had said, I felt sick. "She's trying to minimize it," I murmured. "She's hoping the court will go easy on her." Daniel's grip on his phone tightened. "She's not getting away with this. Not this time." A few days later, Mark woke up. His recovery was slow, but he was lucid enough to talk. And when Daniel and his father visited him in the hospital, they told him everything. How the plate was meant for me. How Lena had been obsessed with controlling Daniel's life for years. How she had tried to paint herself as the victim when she was the one who had nearly killed her own husband. Mark didn't speak for a long time. Then he said 3 words. "I'm divorcing her." I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I was holding. For so long, Mark had been blind to Lena's cruelty. He had excused her behavior, ignored the warning signs. But this was something even he couldn't justify. And he wasn't just divorcing her. He was pressing charges. She could have killed me, he told the police when he made his statement. She almost killed Emma. She needs to pay for what she did. With his testimony added to the case, Lena's fate was sealed. But then came the part that none of us expected. Lena was pregnant. At first, we thought it was just another one of her manipulations, some desperate attempt to gain sympathy. But the medical records confirmed it. She was 2 months along. She had been planning to announce it at the party. The same party where she had poisoned me. A cold chill ran down my spine when I realized what that meant. She wasn't just trying to hurt me out of jealousy. She was trying to steal the moment for herself. She had wanted all the attention, all the sympathy, all the love. And when we made our announcement first, she snapped. She had been so blinded by rage that she hadn't even stopped to think that her own baby would now grow up without a mother. And that wasn't even the worst part. After her confession, she called my in-laws from jail. "Mom, Dad, please, you have to help me. If I go to prison, what happens to my baby?" I expected my mother-in-law to break, to plead with Mark to drop the charges, to beg Daniel to intervene. But she didn't. She simply sighed and said, "You should have thought about that before you poisoned someone, Lena." And for the first time, Lena had no power. No one was coming to save her. No one was falling for her lies. She was truly, completely alone. The trial date was set. And this time, there was nothing she could do to escape the consequences of what she had done. But even with her behind bars, I couldn't shake the unease lingering in my chest, because I knew Lena, and she wasn't the type to go down quietly. Even with Lena in jail, I couldn't shake the fear that she still had some hold over us. For years, she had woven herself into the fabric of our lives, poisoning it thread by thread. And now, for the first time, she was truly gone. No more manipulations. No more twisted games. No more lurking in the background, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But even in her absence, the damage remained. The trial came quickly. The evidence against her was overwhelming. The security footage, her own confession, Mark's testimony. The prosecutor painted a clear picture. Lena wasn't just a jealous sister-in-law. She was a dangerous woman, willing to harm those closest to her just to get what she wanted. Her lawyer tried to plead for leniency. She was emotionally unstable due to her pregnancy. She wasn't thinking clearly. She never meant to cause real harm. But the judge wasn't buying it. "Intentional food tampering is a serious crime," he said, his voice firm. "Regardless of motive, your actions resulted in significant harm. You are a danger to those around you." Lena sobbed, pleading for mercy. "Please, Your Honor, I'm pregnant. I can't raise my baby in prison." The judge didn't waver. "You should have thought of that before you poisoned someone." The same words her own mother had told her. She was sentenced. Several years behind bars, no chance of early release. It was over. And yet, a part of me still felt uneasy. Because while Lena was gone, the scars she left behind weren't. Mark finalized his divorce, cutting ties with her completely. He was a free man now, but the pain in his eyes told me he was still haunted by the woman he had once loved. My in-laws were broken. Their only daughter had become a stranger to them, a monster they never saw coming. My mother-in-law cried for days, not out of grief for Lena's punishment, but for the realization that she had raised someone capable of such cruelty. And Daniel, I had never seen him so exhausted, so emotionally drained. He put on a brave face, acted like he was fine, but I knew him too well. This had crushed him. And as for me, I couldn't eat food I didn't prepare myself. Every time I sat at a restaurant, every time someone handed me a plate at a family gathering, my stomach twisted. I would hear Lena's voice in my head, whispering, "I personally made this plate for you." I didn't trust food anymore. I didn't trust people anymore. It took time, therapy, support from Daniel, my parents, my in-laws. But eventually I started healing. And then, months later, our daughter was born. The moment I held her in my arms, The weight of everything, the fear, the trauma, the paranoia, melted away. She was perfect. Tiny fingers, a soft little cry, eyes that looked up at me with pure innocence. She was light in all the darkness Lena had left behind. She was proof that no matter how much pain someone tries to inflict on you, love always wins. We named her Lily, a name that meant rebirth, because that's exactly what she was. A fresh start, a new beginning. Lena was gone, and for the first time in years, we were finally free. Looking back, I realize now that people like Lena don't change. They just get better at hiding who they really are. If there's one thing this nightmare taught me, it's to trust your instincts. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. Don't make excuses for toxic behavior. Don't wait for them to destroy your peace before you take action. I also learned the importance of setting boundaries. Not everyone deserves access to your life, no matter how much history or blood ties you share. Protecting your peace isn't selfish. It's survival. And most importantly, some battles aren't meant to be fought alone. Surround yourself with people who stand by you, who see the truth when others try to twist it. Love is stronger than hate, and in the end, that's what truly saved us.